how have you learned to calibrate, how deep to go, how personal to be?
I'm not even there yet because I still think, there's so much gravitational force from version 1.0. It still holds me back all the time. It's a hard thing to untangle from. So I would say one of the things that I think was noticeable, I tried to be light about it, but when you start shifting from a brain conversation to a heart conversation, one of the metaphors I would use is my brain was always driving the vehicle. And sometimes I was like, what if the heart drove the vehicle once in a while, or lets your intuition drive the vehicle?
Hello, welcome to Life from Within. Today with us we have Chris Schwalbach. Thank you for joining us today, Chris.
Absolutely.
Okay, so Chris is a serial entrepreneur. He is a finance professional, a board director, and the founder of AVL Growth Partners. AVL is a fractional accounting CFO firm, which recently became part of Ampleo, a national powerhouse in the fractional services. So, Chris, first off, congratulations on the sale of your company.
Yes, yeah, wow. It's hard. It's hard to even. There's a disbelief piece of the emotion right now, for sure, because it's been a long journey.
Well, we're going to get into some of that today. How long has it been since the announcement was made?
2 days.
Okay. Very
2 days.
fresh. Very fresh. And are you getting a deluge of people contacting you?
It's starting. It's been pretty fun. Yeah. It's there's just a lot of it's interesting. Before it went public, I had a list of about 150 people I was calling just to say thank you for their contribution as part of the journey. And I've had a lot of really fun, warm conversations with people over the last couple of weeks before it became public. So that was really, really fun. Yeah.
Now, this is the culmination of a 16-year journey?
16-year journey. Yeah. Yeah.
And that's amazing. Did you have that vision when you started? Or not at all?
No, it was very, very different. I mean, I think, when you start, I was young and kind of like invincible, right? So you don't think about kind of the other end of life spectrum or career and other priorities. So yeah, it was not about that at all. So it's been really taking form, not until more recently, for sure. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay, well, I'm sure we're going to touch on that more in our conversation today. As you know, Life from Within is about unearthing the wisdom and the lessons and learnings and insights that we get from career challenges. Okay, so what is the topic that you want to dive into today, the growth that you've been engaged in?
Yeah, this was interesting. It was a big reflection. I think it's what I'm going to call it is connecting authentically, really, and showing up authentically as a leader. And, as I looked back and I actually went into this journal that I've had with one of my coaches, and I was trying to summarize on one page, like, when did it really start and how did it evolve over the last 6 years? And so I think this story really began back in 2019 when I, in a sense, made the decision for myself to start getting a coach, start working with somebody to say, what's really happening here? Who is Chris Schwalbach? It was a moment where I said, I felt that there was this business success. The company was doing well, but there was this itch. There was this kind of discomfort. There was this feeling that there was more. And I think it was all related to how I was connecting with other people, how I was connecting with my employees, what were my friendships in life, who was my inner circle. And it was all in that theme. And I felt like there was this miss, there was this lacking, there was this disconnectedness. I had been so focused on the business, but maybe the business became secondary almost to the human connection that I could have as a business owner, business leader, a leader in my community. And I was recognizing that I didn't really have those connections in the way that I thought I could.
So what was the evidence that you didn't have those?
I think it was, I would leave an event and feel that, I think it was twofold. One is I didn't feel like I connected with the folks at that event in a way that they knew me. And I felt like when I would show up, I was trying to bring, this is like, it's almost like a little embarrassing, but it's like the way I would show up was by being smart or by being insightful or by bringing value. So if I met with you, the first thing I would do to connect to say, tell me about your business, tell me about your process, and like, let me try to fix something for you. Let me try to bring value. Let me try to help you have a better business. And it was like, that's kind of how I led.
Well, it probably got you a lot of sales.
Sure. It was just very, 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 it was very brain.
Yes.
It was very me giving or trying to give or trying to be smart. And I think that's how I would show up. But when I left the conversation, it wasn't that, even though I may have felt like I kind of helped you in the business, the connection between you and me didn't shift. Right. Mm-hmm. Another example is like, I would see relationships of people in my firm, my company, and see how much more they were connected as individuals, as humans, than I was connected to them.
What were they doing that made you think, oh, they've got a deeper, stronger connection?
Yeah, it's like they knew each other's families, they knew each other's hobbies, they knew like they were checking in at a different level.
Yeah.
And I realized that I wasn't doing that. I wasn't caring or wasn't kind of checking in at that level. And I was just, well, what is, why is that? What is going on? What was the thing? Right. And so, and again, I'm trying to rewind to the point where like, I didn't know the why. I didn't know the reason. I just like, those were the facts that I was kind of like seeing, right?
You were noticing a gap and you had a desire.
Yeah, I did. And it was like the point was changing. It was like in some chapter of AVL, maybe the point was the business. And then it became like, well, the real point is the people. Right. And it started to shift for me maybe a little bit after 10 years of running the company. And it's like, and maybe it's just me as growing up a little bit too, but it was like, I think that's kind of those subtle shifts. And I think just having a little bit more awareness around that and maybe saying, I'm dissatisfied with this. I want to make an impact. I want to change. Right. And so what might that lever be? One of these times where I said, I'm going to ask for help. I'm going to get help to do this because I couldn't read a book to get myself out of, there was no intellectual way out of this thing. It was deeper than that. And that's when I started to make that decision.
Was asking for help, did that feel like a surrender to you? Was that hard?
Yeah. So this is where it's, this story is going to go way back as we really talk about it. So, I grew up in a very, very independent way. Right. Independence was highly valued. So I have a young sister who developed a glioblastoma cancer at the age of 3. I was 7. And my mom flew into full-time care of my sister 24/7. And my dad flew into work 24/7. And so I grew up in a very much of the way that you can best be a kid, Chris, is to be independent and stay on the rails and cause as little work for us as parents because we have our hands full with your sister. And I was thanked for getting good grades. I was thanked for doing my homework. I was thanked for getting to school by myself since I was 5, like 6 years old. It was very much a independent thing. So I didn't grow up like those relationships, building dependencies on others. And it was about doing things on my own. So I think a lot of that, in a very interesting way, blame cancer shaded who I became, right? So I think that asking for help was a very much of a not custom thing in my family unit to go do. Yeah.
Yeah. Your habit was to do it yourself. And so
Correct.
this decision to go get help, to learn how to connect authentically and feel different about your relationships was a big change for you.
Yeah. And in fact, after I made the decision to hire my coach, I fired my coach 2 times because I'm like, I don't know. Like, I don't know if you're really that good at what you do. And, and like, and the coaching was part of the whole process of like committing to it. And it was just hard because like, I even kind of joke guitar lessons. Like I picked up guitar and I'm like, I haven't hired a coach. I do everything online on YouTube. I'm like, why don't you just hire a coach to teach you to play guitar? Like, no, I'm just going to do it. I'm just going to do it on LinkedIn, like do it myself. And it's so funny to observe all that. And it's really deep. One of the first things that came through that coaching, and this was what started like 6 years ago. And again, this goes back to the family unit. There was this underlying belief, and it was super deep. And I'll tell you, I mean, I can tell you where it came from, but it was like the statement that I grew up with was, it's impolite to ask people personal questions. And that was intrusive. It was none of your business. And there was also an element of safety about it, saying, keep your distance. You don't want to know too much information, because if you start to get personal, then your heart can kind of go into that situation. And it was very much of like, where is this coming from? Like, what is this? Why is it impolite to ask people personal questions? So part of that relationship building, when I told you earlier, I always stuck to the business questions. They were non-personal. They were like, let me help your business. Let's talk about your company. And that was kind of what I was good at. It was an amazing moment. This is again 6 years ago, but it was like my coach helped me kind of unpack. Like, my dad was a physician. He worked with dying patients every day, and his patients died all the time. And so we started asking this question: is it possible that your dad doesn't ask personal questions and doesn't want to get it too emotional close because he has to protect himself from his job? Is it because of his profession, versus is it a universal truth that you should not ask people personal questions? And it just hit me upside the head. Like, I just couldn't even believe what I was hearing. And it was so logical. It was like somebody telling me the Easter bunny wasn't real for the first time. You know what I mean? Yeah, no kidding. Why would an Easter bunny be hiding eggs? It was like, well, now it makes complete sense, right? And so that's what it was like to me. It was just like that kind of unraveling. And I remember after that time, that moment of learning that, I went and visited my parents. Then I couldn't unsee it. Everything they were talking about was distance and not asking personal questions. And we were asking about family members and their kids. He's like, wow, that's none of my business. That's none of my business. I'm like, wow, okay.
He was literally saying those words.
Literally saying these words in the car, driving from the airport. Like, I was like, oh, this is so like how we
Yes.
talked as a family. This is
Yes.
what we did.
I just want to call out what you were describing there was a paradigm shift for you. And it was a shift of realizing that, oh, this belief that I thought was mine is actually his belief. And so that leaves the opening to ask the question, well, what do I believe?
Absolutely. And it wasn't even saying the belief was bad. The belief served him. It didn't actually work for me, right? And that was like, wow. And then there was another question in that coaching thing, which is, how do you feel when people ask you personal questions? Which I'd never asked myself before. I absolutely love it. And usually when I recognize the relationships that I was having, if the other person went personal, I was like, yes. I didn't realize it at the time, but I was always waiting for the other person to dive in. And I would follow them into the rabbit hole, but I would never lead. And it was this moment where my coach was saying, if you like it, is it possible that other people like when you ask them personal questions? I'm like, oh, well, yes, of course it's possible, right? Not everybody, but it's very, very possible that other people like being asked very personal questions. And again, it was the second hit upside the head saying, wow, now I'm just like, what else is out there that I have these beliefs around that maybe just that just been holding me in a place, right?
Right, right.
I think that was like the beginning of so many things for me.
Yeah.
And I think the other one was safety, this arm's length. And part of the story that became the next chapter was this rule that I remember, just like, don't get too close to a workmate, right? Or an employee. Don't get too close, because separation of church and state. You can't manage an employee if you have a close relationship with them, because you're crossing these lines.
Do you remember the first time that you tried asking one of your employees a more personal question?
Yeah, and it caused a whole lot of problems because
Tell us.
because here's the thing, like, you've been walking this certain path with your employees for 10 years, right? And the groove is in the ground, and they know that path. And all of a sudden you come to work one day and you're like, you're going down a different path, and they're like, oh, who the hell is this? Where are we going? This feels weird. What about the path that we've been on for 10 years together? And in my marriage, that was a path that we were on for 25 years together. And all of a sudden she's like, where are you going? This is not the agreement that we've had, right? So that it created some weirdness for a while until I could start talking about it in a meta way. But yeah, it was actually very disorienting for a lot of the people that I was already working with, people that didn't know me, that I was building relationships with, where there was no path. That was great. It was wonderful. For the ones that were closest to me, they were very, very disoriented.
Yeah, I met you after you had this realization, right? So I met the new Chris. But your point about it being disorienting for those around you is so critical and valid. When people get sober, that frequently happens because everyone around them has developed patterns and conditioning around how to behave with this person. And then this person shows up. And when someone gets sober, it's like they start to become the person that they used to be, or a more authentic version of themselves, just like you're talking about.
Yeah. I was just thinking, and embarrassingly, I wasn't as touchy or huggy with my children. And this distance thing, and again, I can't explain it, and it seems so hard to say, but coming and saying, let's hug and let's connect in that way. And I can say I was a loving dad, but just not a hugger. Now I hug them every time I can see them. That was just an amazing shift. Can you imagine that first time your kids are like, who's this guy?
Dad, what's happening?
What's
are
happening?
You okay?
What's happening?
Is this a midlife crisis?
Correct. Absolutely correct. And by the way, that's 6 years ago. That was basically 50. So it was like dead on midlife crisis timing. My wife's like, oh God, where's the convertible? Is the convertible coming anytime soon? Right. So, there were some hard moments there. And I think my wife was even very much like, listen, stop. Let's go slow. I'm the one that's not changing here. Let's reorient a little bit. So it was a lot of shift. I knew it was the right course. And I think over time she's recognized this version of me is a great version and a great place. It was a shock to the system for sure. So
in the course of learning how, what I'm envisioning is someone putting on roller skates for the first time and learning how to roller skate. But did you have moments of sharing too much? How have you learned to calibrate how deep to go, how personal to be?
I'm not even there yet, because I still think, there's so much gravitational force from version 1.0. It still holds me back all the time. It's a hard thing to untangle from. So I would say one of the things that I think was noticeable, and I tried to be light about it, but when you start shifting from a brain conversation to a heart conversation, one of the metaphors I would use is my brain was always driving the vehicle. What if the heart drove the vehicle once in a while, or lets your intuition drive the vehicle? But I realized that, and this is like jokes amongst my dearest friends, is my heart vocabulary was very, very nascent. Like I knew 4 emotions, I just hadn't used those words.
Yeah.
I was very stumbly about, we'd get into conversations with my dearest friends who were helping me with this growth. And they would say, so how do you feel today? I'm like, I don't know words. And then it's like, let's practice. Let's practice some of these words. Let's explore, and it's just talking about how I felt was just so it got into this practicing using my voice, practicing these words. When I was asking somebody about how they were doing or wanted to go deeper, it was like learning to trust in myself that it's coming from a heart place and that you can be wrong. And I can be wrong and maybe I'm off, but just trusting in my voice because I had not done that for a long time. I think that's just been the journey. That's been a lot of the journey of where I've come from. And I think I'm trying to think of a way to explain that, but it's like, if it's Kelly, you and me and going on a walk and me saying, I can't tell you how much I appreciate our times together when we go on these walks, right? Those would not be words that came out of version 1.0. It'd be fist bump, see you later, good to see you, right? And thanks for talking about your business, right? And so just expressing that gratitude or telling you how much I enjoy being with you is so much different for me now than it used to be. That's big.
Yeah, that's huge. That's huge. And what I love about that is the journey you have been on to learn this for yourself. You're demonstrating that for everyone around you and leading by example. So your children now.
Right. Yes.
Right. Well, but they get to see you be this new way and they're teens and early 20s. So imagine the impact it's going to have on their relationships, every relationship they have to come.
Yeah.
Now, I want to switch gears. Yeah. Okay. I want to connect this back to the more meta trajectory of your more recent career. So you started on this journey 2019. And since then, you had this thriving business and you decided, I'm going to bring in a CEO, I'm going to step away. Then you let that play out for a little while and you weren't getting the outcome you wanted from that. So you stepped back in. And then you ultimately pivoted and found an acquirer for the company. So this is all happening at the same time that you're learning how to be more authentic or connect more authentically. So tell me, how do those two journeys relate? How did your learning and skill around connecting authentically actually make you successful in all of these different pivots that you had?
When coming back in the role, one of the things that I felt like there's probably an exit in the future for the company. I don't know what that exit looks like, but I think it was this moment where I was reading the book Small Giants. I think we're finishing big, or some of these books that are a little bit about exiting. And I think one of these quotes hit me, which is every business exits because at some point every business exits because every founder dies, right? Whether you're exiting on the operating table or at the boardroom table, how do you want it to happen, right? And the CEO one was hiring the CEO was, if I was honest for myself, it was a moment where I said, maybe I'm avoiding the very difficult path to exit, but I kind of said, but if someone can run the business, we've seen people do this, maybe that's just a really great long-term, win. There was that, but when I came back, it was this moment saying, I don't want to do that again. I don't feel that that's the right thing. And I want to navigate what are the other options. I guess that's the best way. It's like, I'm going to just navigate. So what I made this decision is saying, as the CEO, as the owner, as the chairman of the board, whatever you want to call it, I'm just like, I am going to meet. I committed to saying, I want to just go meet who is in this space, who is in my space, who are all my competitors, who are the investors, who are building firms. Over a period about 2 months upon coming back, I just built this list of like 100 people that I felt would be insightful for me, to either say, how are you thinking about investing in this space? Why are you building a platform in this space? There was a bunch of other, let's just call it acquirers that just wanted to buy a business in this space. Like, why do you find this space interesting? Why do you think the future of fractional accounting, is? So where I'm getting back to is this list of 100, and building these relationships is probably not something I would have just said, yeah, Chris, let's go dial and call 100 people. Let's go build relationships. Let's just go talk. In some ways, I wasn't trying to get to anything. I wasn't trying to go from let's have a conversation and I had a point and we were going to get something done. It was really like, we're going to meet, we're going to build a relationship, and I don't know what's going to happen, right? I don't know. But I knew that the building the relationships was where I wanted to start. And so I just committed to that. And I think that was the difference. So I guess I'm trying to answer your question. That was really the noticeable difference from this shift, is having just these conversations with people and having the confidence to build those relationships, and knowing that I didn't have to be right or be smart in these conversations. And I think that was a little bit of part of the journey as well.
When you said the journey of building these relationships, I didn't feel the need to feel smart or to be right. And what's coming up for me as I'm listening to that is your journey with learning how to be comfortable asking more personal questions or having a deeper relationship with people. It's built on your willingness to allow your curiosity to breathe, right? Allow your curiosity to drive some of your questions. And maybe that comes from the heart or comes from the gut or from the head, but you're giving room and space and permission to your curiosity to ask what it wants to ask.
In trust, there was a lot of trusting myself to ask those questions.
Wait, tell me more about that. When you say trusting myself, trusting that it would be okay, that the person
trusting that it would be okay,
wouldn't come back to you and say, that's none of your business.
Or that's a stupid question, right?
Okay.
So I think a friend of mine, we call it our heads are on a swivel. Version 1.0, I would say that you and I are talking, and it'd be like, well, I'm thinking about asking this question. Would that offend Kelly? Would she think that I'm asking her that because I'm trying to get something for her? And then I would think about my answer if she answered that way. And then I'd be like, oh, well, that could be offensive. So, how would she construe that? I don't want to hurt her feelings. So maybe I should ask it a different way. And then, I'm not going to ask anything. And so now it's saying, I trust myself that I'm not going to ask an offensive question. I trust myself that my heart is actually curious of the question, and to trust that curiosity and just ask the question. And I don't have that circular thinking about what you're going to say. And if you say that, how am I going to respond? And that whole loop, that wasted energy, is really much quieter than it's used to be. That's the trust of, when you're saying curiosity is a good word for it. I trust myself that I'm asking questions that are authentically coming from a good place. And if I trust that, then I don't have to audit the questions before they come out.
Yeah. And you know what that also does is it allows you to be more present with the other person and actually hear what the other person is saying, which allows the connection to grow.
It does. And there's, I have to add another little bullet point in that, because this is another thing. When somebody else is saying something to you, a compliment, appreciation, I used to deflect. I didn't want to hear the compliment. I would say, yeah, thanks very much, but back to you. I didn't want to, so that coach and I, we call it receiving. I wouldn't receive back. And so we really practice on, but that's part of the relationship. When you're trying to give to me and I say, I receive that, I hear you, thank you. That is another way of because I think it was to me, it was where he wanted to, it was me asking the personal questions, me doing the active part. And my coach was like, yeah, that's half. The other half is receiving and hearing what's happening on the other side. I'm like, it didn't have that. And she was like, yeah, because you deflect all these compliments. You deflect when someone's like, God, your business is amazing. Thanks, let's move on. And I still am not very good at that. And I think it's a little Midwest humble kind of stuff.
I haven't thought about that. So the receiving, absolutely. Receiving, having the heart be open and allowing yourself to feel the feelings that the other person is sharing with you. And I wonder, so here's my wondering. The discomfort that comes up, you called it Midwestern humble, which it absolutely, that's a real thing. And how much of it has anything to do with the discomfort of actually having the attention on you? So if you think about to your story back to your childhood, if the attention was on you, that was a bad thing, because that meant you were taking attention away from this other very important thing that your parents needed to have attention on, right?
There's a whole lot of garnering attention issues for sure. Yeah.
Well, I think this is a really timely topic, because with the acquisition of your company, the announcement 2 days ago, there's a lot of attention that is being placed on you, going to be coming your way. So that'll, the whole receiving thing, you're going to get to practice that receiving. I love it.
Yeah, I know it's I haven't even posted, on LinkedIn to announce, and it's gone public and everyone else is doing this. There is a little resistance still happening. How do I post this? What do I want to say? The gratitude I have around it is tremendous. Words on a page just are, just like it's never enough. I'm overthinking it a little bit. I can see there's a tiny bit of resistance and just hitting send, you know what I mean, on the whole thing. And then waiting for some of that attention. It's accurate. It's accurate.
Okay, so I'm curious, going back to you showed up as new Chris with your employees and they were like, whoa, who's this guy? What's happening? How do we respond to this? What new practices or cultural norms are in place in your company as a result of this shift that you made? So were there any things that you put into place intentionally or became a norm as a result?
I would say I wish I were even further along in terms of how I'm connecting with the whole team, even that I've been on this journey for many years. I would love to ask my team this more than me, because I feel like I'm still on the not even the midfield yet. I think there's just a long way to go. And I think some of it is that rut that was, the rut or the path. There's so much history. I think that it has been hard for me to get in this new, way.
I also think in a business environment, the time pressure that comes with having an endless to-do list and always wanting to do more than there's time to have it be done in, that definitely impacts our willingness to put time, invest time in the more personal connection, because there's so much to get done and we got to get it done. And it's the work day and that's what we're supposed to be doing, working, right?
Oh,
and that's in every business environment.
Yeah, I think it is. I think maybe the story is like, I respect other people's time tremendously. And so when I'm having a meeting or we're working through our day together, to show respect for someone's time, I want to be as brief and quick as possible so that your day doesn't go longer. I would love for you to get back to your family, get back to your things. I don't want to extend your day. You know what I mean? I want to be super efficient. And so much of the history of our company has been from, in a sense, there's a lot of moms that want to get back to their families that work with us. And so they are multitaskers. And so I'm like, I want to respect the multitasking. You're here, very deliberate, let's chop chop. And there is this underlying respect and appreciation. I think there's a guiding force there a little bit that I think is cultural. That's why I'm saying it's soft and subtle, because I think there is a care. I know I'm just thinking of one employee, and I know her kid. I know where she is in school. I know what's going on in her life. I know what her kid loves. And so we'll get on a call and it'll be like one quick question and like, what's going on with your daughter? And it's a wink and a nod to working on our stuff. Right. So like, that's what I'm saying. It's soft and subtle. I think it's just like a subtle shift for me. I think I'm listening more, and I think I am a little bit more present in it than I used to be, but I don't think there's anything massive that's shifted as an organization. I don't think we were like 20 degrees, shifted in terms of what's happening in terms of how the company really looks and feels.
Interesting. I mean, you said earlier, you almost would love to hear how your employees would answer that question. Yeah. You could have that conversation, right? I think that there are ways that teams have codified that kind of personal connection time, whether it's, okay, at the beginning of this one meeting, specific meeting that we have every week, we do an icebreaker question. We go around and we ask something that's more personal. It'd be interesting to hear what your team has to say. And they might have some ideas for how to take it one notch deeper if you wanted to, if they wanted to.
Yeah, I think those are all good things. And I think it's just, how big is the sport of our people in terms of our success, right? I think there's just this growing importance of the people and the connection of the people in how we work together and how we are thinking about our people business that's continued to grow and to be bigger and more centric, right? And how we've invested in people more and how we've done things a little bit more to listen to what the teams are saying. Those are the little things, and I think they're additive. And I hope that kind of is starting to kind of show through, right? In terms of what we're, sometimes I feel like I should be connecting with everyone individually, and I would love nothing more than do that. But the practicality is I need the team that is connecting in a powerful way because I can't do it. I would love to, but I can't, right? Just from a time perspective. But if the culture is such that it's doing that, and I think that's shifting a little bit, and that not shifting, but just continuing to evolve and grow, that I think that is kind of where I think that my shift is kind of permeating through the organization a little
Great.
bit
So your
every day.
shift is permeating in a way that is subtly shifting the culture, is what I'm hearing.
I believe
Yeah.
it is a little
Yeah.
bit.
I bet
Yes.
it is. I bet
Yeah.
it is.
And I also like, this is the humble is like, and there's a long way to go. And I wish there's more, but I see the evidence that there's movement there. Yeah.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So what would you tell someone who's another leader, let's say, a business leader who's skeptical or afraid to try more authenticity? What advice would you have for that person?
Well, this is another fun one to say as far as this M&A announcement, is this acquisition, right? Is the relationship of the guys that acquired us was started 8 years ago. I met them 8 years ago to establish that relationship and planted those seeds. And I look at all these life events that I've had, all these amazing things, big forks in the road for me, and how many of those forks in the road happened through the relationships that I created. And I was creating those relationships in first gear or second gear. I'm an introvert. Not a natural networker. Or, I don't even like that word. I just like getting to know people. One of my top values is human connection, which is really weird, but I love it. And maybe it's such a value because I've been thirsting it for so long. So going back to the question of intention around these human relationships and how it's opened so many doors for me, and how many more doors would that have, like, not to say I'm in a place that I don't love right now. If someone's starting their careers, like, that's where the magic happens. I'm getting to this point where, like, that's actually the point of life. Like, the point is not necessarily the business. The point is actually the relationships. And that's actually the richness of life, is those relationships, and everything else will just happen as a function of those. I would start that just intention just early,
Mm-hmm.
right? I remember I had my first job when I got to Colorado. My first job in Colorado was, we were on a corporate campus, and there was no reason to leave this campus. It had food, it had gym, it had a haircut place, it had a doctor. You just never had to leave. I was at this moment where I'm like, if I never leave here, the only people I'm going to know ever are the people on this campus, right? They're great people, but I remember having this moment saying that is also very limiting. And I set this goal that I'm going to do 8 lunches a month, or 8 coffees or lunches a month, not on campus. And I'm going to go meet other people. And I had no idea what I was doing. It was almost like closing time, the song, I don't want to stay here. I have to, like, I got to go somewhere else. And I just started meeting people, and it was like a forcing function for me. It was very awkward. It wasn't my natural, right? For sure. I can only imagine if I was in my authentic self back then to start that kind of momentum, how much it would create. So that's what I'm just putting on someone earlier in their career. And I'm even talking to my son about this now, who's graduating college, and just go meet people.
Mm-hmm.
Ask a different question. You're not looking for a job. You're just like, what do you do? Tell me about your career, and just go dig. And that's going to open doors. Just like, go meet people, follow the goose trail. And I think one of these things has led to me to, like, this, even in business today, like turning over rocks, all the opportunities, the majority of opportunities, you're focusing this way, and the opportunities hit you upside the head from a place you're not even looking. You don't know where things are coming from. I just turn over stones,
Yes.
turn over stones, right? And I think that's just constantly what I'm doing. And I think doing that through meeting people now is just crazy. So I think turning over stones, 8 years later, I meet somebody that acquires my company, right? You don't know where that came from. I didn't expect that 8 years ago. I wasn't planning on it 8 years ago. I set the seed, built a relationship, established credibility, and, just respect and just curiosity, and kept the relationship going. And now it's here. And I can point to that throughout the M&A process and all the other people I've talked to. Those were seeds that were planted years and years and years ago. We just got a new client from someone that I met 12 years ago. And they said, hey, you helped us 12 years ago. I got a new thing going. Can you help me again? Like, 12 years. It's amazing how, when you treat somebody well 12 years ago, that's what they remember.
Mm-hmm.
And they come back.
Yeah.
Right?
Well, that you've heard about that Harvard study that was done over the course of 8 decades. And the big finding was that people's health and happiness, the biggest driving factor of that was the quality of their relationships. That's it, right? Yeah. And that really echoes what you're saying. I love how you talked about, you put your focus and attention into building the relationships, meeting new people, turning over stones, digging without the expectation that something specific is going to happen in that one relationship. But what ultimately comes back is opportunities come from the field that you've been cultivating, right? It's the field that you've been cultivating from which the opportunities arise, and you just don't know where specifically in the field the opportunities are going to arrive. Yeah. Any final parting words of advice or wisdom that you wanted to say but you haven't said yet?
I'm learning this through a dear friend right now, but I'm now trying to be more active and intentional around who do I want to reconnect with. I have a dear friend, Mike. It's just like my natural gear is like I forget to connect with Mike, and I'm just trying to be much more. You know what? I gotta be intentional about keeping those connections alive, and it's just not my natural gear. So I'm just saying I am making an effort to make sure Mike is on my list, so to speak, and reaching out to Mike and saying, "Hey, what's going on? Like, hey, you were working on this. How did that go? Right? And how's your son doing with, that challenge he was facing, and what's the latest?" Right? That is a new and unnatural thing for me. And another one is telling them how much you appreciate them. Right? And just doing that. And I think we got connected to Walter Green, and Walter Green has this foundation called Say It Now. And his whole premise is we always tell people how much we love them at their funeral. And that's when we do all the eulogies and everything. Yeah. He's like, well, why not just tell them today? Why not just tell them now when you're both alive? And it's just a really fun reminder. And so Walter went, when he turned 70, he basically spent a year visiting 50 people throughout his life that were part of it. And he's like, spent a half a day with them just to tell them how much they meant to him. He was making up for lost time, but I think it's just a really cool way to kind of say, like, let's just say it now. Let's just say it and tell people how much like they mean to us and why they're impactful. And so when I was talking to you earlier in the session here about calling of the people that were part of my journey. So there's a guy that I had lunch with him when I was 1.5 employees. And he's like, what are you doing? Like, you're crazy. And I'm rooting for you, but you're crazy. And now I called him, and he's been rooting for me for 16 years. And I called him and he's just like, dude, I'm so happy for you. That's so amazing. Like, remember when you were 1 employee? And yeah, I do. And he's like, you were insane. You've been part of this journey. You're the reason I'm here today. I think people would just, I don't know, they felt part of it, and they should feel part of it because they were part of it. And those were the most amazing calls to make. And some of my team members who have been with us for years and years, it's so rewarding to have that call. And like, we wouldn't be here if you hadn't been on this train. It's this be active in it kind of moment.
That's a great way to care for people. Yeah. Well, thank you for that, Chris. And thank you for joining us today. So if people want to follow your journey, connect with you, what's the best way for them to do that? LinkedIn, your website?
I think LinkedIn is probably the best.
And we'll put the link to your LinkedIn profile in the show notes so people can find it there.
That'd be great. Awesome.
Thank you, Chris. Thanks for tuning into Life from Within. See the show notes for links and resources mentioned in today's episode. If you enjoyed today's conversation, please subscribe, follow, and share it with friends and family who might enjoy it too. You can also leave a review. It helps others discover and benefit from the podcast. Until next time, keep living and leading from the inside out.